norepinephrine and epinephrine, as you know, that there's some nerve endings secrete these neurotransmitters. Also, they are secreted by the glands, and they will reach via the circulation. Other neurotransmitters such as ATP, serotonin, dopamine, cholecystokinin, substance P, vasoactive intestinal polypeptide, etc. These have both mixed excitatory and inhibitory effects. Now, it's important to know that beside the enteric nervous system, there is some sensory afferent nerves originating in the gut cell, within the epithelium, within the muscle or the mucosa. They send some sensory signals from the gut, and they send it either to the enteric nervous system itself or higher centers like the dorsal root ganglia, to the spinal cord, or even the brainstem to induce some reflexes required for the proper function of the gastrointestinal system. And we know that the vagus nerve usually carries about 80% of its nerve fibers afferent from the gut and goes to the medulla, to the brain medulla, indicating or generating the vagal reflex. Now, these sensory neurons stimulated by different stimulants like distension of the gut, واحد أكل صار في distension or stretch of the gut part. ممكن في عنا irritation, any irritants, infection, ممكن chemical. هاي بتعمل stimulation of the sensory neurons within the gut to send signals either to the enteric nervous system or higher centers to generate the action or the proper action for the gastrointestinal tract. Now, this, as we said, that this stimulation can either excite or inhibit the movement or the gastrointestinal secretion. Now, we are done with the intrinsic nervous system of the gut, and this is the most important regulator. Also, the gut receives neuronal control from the autonomic nervous system through the parasympathetic nervous system, which is mainly stimulatory for the gastrointestinal function through the acetylcholine, and also through the sympathetic nervous system, which mainly inhibitory, inhibit the gastrointestinal function through norepinephrine. Now, the parasympathetic innervation to the gut is originating from two divisions. The first one from the cranial division, mostly through the vagus nerve, and it innervates about the first half of the gut, and the sacral division, which is originating from S2 to S4, and also innervates the distal half of the gut. Now, the neurons of the parasympathetic nervous system, the preganglionic one, are usually long, and they synapse in the postganglia with the enteric nervous system, mainly with the enteric nervous system. And these parasympathetic innervation of the gastrointestinal system usually have excitatory or stimulatory effect here, تحفيزية للgut movement and motility. Now, it's important to know that the sacral division of the parasympathetic innervation is important for innervation of the distal gut, and it's important for the induction of the defecation reflex. And also these parasympathetic fibers carry, as we said, some afferent sensory fibers. About 80% of the vagus nerve are afferent fibers carrying sensory signals from the gut to the higher centers. On the other hand, the sympathetic innervation, this is mainly coming from T5 to L2 cell bodies. The cell bodies originate in these vertebrae and synapses with the prevertebral ganglia, as we see here. Now, they will also send their nerve endings to these ganglions, the celiac ganglion, the superior and inferior mesenteric ganglions, and they will terminate into the enteric nervous system or synapse with the enteric nervous system within the gut itself. and they mainly secrete norepinephrine within the gut. Usually it has inhibitory effect, so mainly through decreasing the activity or inhibiting the activity of the enteric nervous system itself. So they inhibit directly the enteric nervous system. This is the major effect. It also has some inhibitory effect due to the norepinephrine secreted, and this doesn't work on the mucosal smooth muscle, only on the smooth muscle or the longitudinal one and the circular one. Also, the sympathetic nervous system carries some afferent sensory neurons to the higher centers. About 50% of the nerve fibers are afferent sensory neurons. The neurotransmitters, as we said, the preganglionic or most of the preganglionic nerves, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic secrete acetylcholine, and the postganglionic parasympathetic nervous system secrete acetylcholine, while the sympathetic release norepinephrine. Now, there is some reflexes. There is a stimulus within the gastrointestinal tract, which results in a certain reflex, either locally or distally, to generate a specific action. Now, the local reflexes, which means that they are generated within the enteric nervous system of the gastrointestinal system, within the gut itself. So there is afferent fibers from the gut terminating in the gut nervous system, and this is important to control all the activities, including the secretion, the movement of the gut, and even any local inhibitory effects. Apart from the local reflexes, there is a long reflexes that coming outside the gut into higher centers, then coming back to the gut to generate a proper action through afferent nerves going to the prevertebral sympathetic ganglia, then through an afferent nerve to the gut again, inducing some reflexes. For example, we have the gastrocolic reflex, and this is originating from the stomach, resulting in colon evacuation. A message coming from the stomach to the colon: please evacuate, please empty, please defecate. This is the reflex. The other one, enterogastric reflex, and this is coming from the colon and the small intestine, sending a message to the stomach: please stop motility and secretion. Please relax now. We are busy. The small intestine and the colon, we are busy now. We cannot receive any more from you, so please stop your motility and your secretion, my dear stomach. The last one is the colonoileal, and this is coming from the colon, telling the ileum, please stop emptying into our side. So these just two, when there is some part of the gastrointestinal tract is busy with its function, it will ask the other organs to wait until they finish or until they are ready to receive more food from their part. في عنا other reflex called the vagovagal reflex. راح تسمعوه كثير بالgastrointestinal. This is from the stomach and the duodenum, going through an afferent nerve, the vagal reflex, to the brainstem, and then comes back through an efferent nerve to the stomach and duodenum again, and this will control the gastric motor and secretory activity. The defecation reflex, as we said before, from the colon and the reflex from the spinal cord, going back to the colon and the rectum, please, through the pelvic nerve, please evacuate the colon content. There is a pain reflex, which will result in overall inhibition of the gastrointestinal tract system. Now, this is another important regulatory mechanisms within the gastrointestinal system, which is the hormonal regulation. Please هذا كثير مهم تعرفوا، وكمان لقدام شوي لما نحكي عن الدايجستشن والابسوربشن راح يرجعوا يتكرروا معنا. فبليز اعرفوا الهرمونز، كل واحد شو الفانكشن تبعه وين بيأثر؟ لأنه هذا very important part of the gastrointestinal system. أول هرمون، طبعا هذول الهرمون زي ما بنعرف they will not be secreted from the gastrointestinal. They will be secreted locally. However, they will reach the gastrointestinal system through the circulation, and most of them they are secreted within the gastrointestinal system from the mucosa, and they will reach the gastrointestinal tract through the blood circulation. So they will work distally. The first important hormone is gastrin. This hormone is secreted from the G cells of the antrum, jejunum and jejunum, and it is stimulated by any protein in the diet. Distension of the gut واحد أكل صار في distension. Also it is induced by vagal stimulation عن طريق releasing gastrin releasing peptide. The gastrin releasing peptide stimulates the release of gastrin, and it is inhibited by acidic contents. This hormone is important to stimulate the gastric acid secretion. So gastrin, gastric acid secretion stimulation, and has trophic effect on the mucosa, resulting in the growth of the mucosa. The other one is the cholecystokinin, CCK. This is stimulated by any dietary products, including protein, fat, and acid in the food, and it is secreted from the eye cells of the jejunum, and the ileum. This hormone is important for the function of the biliary and pancreatic secretions. So it stimulates the pancreatic, both the enzymes and bicarbonate components, and these will be discussed in more detail later at the secretory function of the gastrointestinal tract. The cholecystokinin is a strong stimulator for gallbladder contraction. So it will empty the biliary content, and it also stimulates the growth of the exocrine pancreas. This hormone also inhibits the gastric emptying, and while it's emptying the pancreas and the gallbladder, or stimulating the release of the pancreatic and gallbladder secretions, it will ask the stomach to relax, stop emptying, and also it will inhibit the appetite centers through the vagus nerve. The third hormone is secretin, and it's stimulated by acid and fats in the food, released from the jejunum, and the ileum. And this hormone is important for the release of pepsin, gastric pepsin, also bicarbonate secretions in the pancreas, or the biliary bicarbonates as well. It also, like this cholecystokinin, stimulates the growth of the exocrine pancreas, and it suppresses the gastric acid secretion. Another hormone, which is called gastric inhibitory peptide, or glucose-dependent insulinotropic peptide. This peptide is stimulated by protein, fat, and carbohydrates, dietary supplements, and it's released from the K cells of the jejunum and jejunum, stimulates the insulin release. This is part of the endocrine function of the pancreas, inhibits the gastric acid secretion and gastric emptying. One more interesting hormone is motilin. This is released in the case of fasting. وجدوا انه يزيد افرازه هذا الهرمون، وجدوا انه بيزيد الجاستريك موتيليتي. بيعمل ويفز بسموهم اللي هو الانتردايجستيف myeloelectric complexes frequent waves. الواحد وهو صايم بضل يتحرك الجت موتيليتي عنده، وبتزيد الانتستينال موتيليتي. However, لما يصير في ingestion of food, this hormone is suppressed, and it is released by the M cells of the jejunum and jejunum. Now, we have some functional types of movements in the gastrointestinal tract. We'll go for these in like introduction, and they will be discussed in more details later. Just so we will understand the main mechanisms of these functions. The first one is the propulsive movement, or pushing movement. دفع اللي هو الأكل خلال gastrointestinal system, which are called the peristalsis of the gut. So the stimulation for the peristalsis is distension of the gut في أكل, irritation, في infection, في stimulus, في drug, or parasympathetic nervous system. Very easily, the principle of peristalsis, where there is any bolus of food, there will be proximally or on the orad direction. Orad means toward the mouth or proximally. There is an area of contraction, pushing the food down, with downstream area of relaxation. And both should be available. Proximal contraction, distal relaxation to receive the pushed food bolus, and this is called the law of the gut. So peristalsis simply proximal constriction, mainly by the circular muscle of the smooth muscles, with distal relaxation, resulting in pushing of the food through the gastrointestinal system. The myenteric plexus's function is very important. No myenteric plexuses, no peristalsis, and atropine is a non-blocker for the peristalsis function. The other one is mixing. There is no pushing of the food, just mixing the food by local intermittent constrictive contractions. There is intermittent that results in segmentation and chopping of the gastrointestinal content, mixing it without moving it locally, just mixing. And this is important to mix the food with the digestive products. It's important to know whenever there is a peristaltic contraction facing a sphincter distally, this would result in mixing, لأنه الفود ما بيكمل ما بيمر بيصطدم بالسفنكتر اللي منقبض، فبشو بصير عملية mixing. Now, a few words about the muscularis mucosa. هاي المصل مهمة عشان الfolding of the intestinal mucosa. This is very important for the contraction of the intestinal villi, which is required for the absorption. This will be discussed in more detail later. These mucosal folds increase the surface area exposed to the digestive products, to the gastrointestinal content, resulting in absorption. Now, mucosal and villus contractions مهمة are initiated by local nervous reflexes in the submucosal nerve plexuses in response to chyme in the small intestine. Okay, so مهمة أو اللي contractions is initiated by the local nervous system of the guts. It's important to know generally about the circulation of the gastrointestinal tract, and this is really important for understanding the absorption of the nutrients later on. The circulation of the gastrointestinal tract is mainly provided through the splanchnic circulation. بتخيل أخذتوا هذا الإشي بالأناتومي. من الأورطة بيجينا 3 major arteries: celiac artery, superior mesenteric artery, and the inferior mesenteric artery. These arteries will supply most of the gut, and also from the celiac artery there is a hepatic artery going to the vein. So I think the stomach, the spleen, the pancreas, this is the celiac artery, the superior artery from the pancreas, small intestine, and proximal part of the colon, while the inferior mesenteric artery will supply the distal part of the colon. Now, these splanchnic circulation carry about 25 to 30% of the cardiac output to the gut. It is important to know that all the most of the gastrointestinal tract is drained, the gastrointestinal tract venous circulation drained through the portal vein to the liver, okay? And there in the sinusoids, all the absorbed nutrients and substances from the gastrointestine will join in the liver sinusoid, and it will go to the hepatic vein to the inferior vena cava circulation. It's important to know that drainage of the gastrointestinal content into the liver is important for the reticular endothelial cells to remove bacteria, so any harmful microbes will be removed within the liver before it's go to the systemic circulation. It's important to know that, and this will be discussed in more details at the absorption lectures, that half to thirds of the water-soluble substances, which are mainly carbohydrates and proteins, are removed and stored within the liver itself. However, for the fats, which are not water-soluble, they will be absorbed into the intestinal lymphatics. They won't go to the portal circulation, and this will go to the thoracic duct before going to the systemic circulation. So the fats will bypass the liver. They won't go to the liver itself. It's important to know that the blood flow through the intestinal villi, which is the main absorptive unit of the small intestine. So the villi, the circulation is arranged in a way that the arteriole is coming proximally, looping back with the venules. This would result in shunting of oxygen at the distal part of the villi before it reaches the top. So most of the oxygen was shunted from the arteriole to the venules at the distal part. This is, in the normal situation, is okay. Okay, it is okay. That won't be harmful. However, when there is ischemia or a shock, no enough blood will reach the top of the villi. This will result in destruction of the villi surfaces, and this would reduce the absorptive capabilities of the gastrointestinal tract. It's important to know there is within the central villi there is central lacteals. These lacteals are involved in collecting the lymph drains here and carrying it into the lymphatic system. Now, the blood flow in the gastrointestinal tract is controlled by different mechanisms. The first one is the local activity. So when there is meal, which results in increased blood flow, and when there is increased motor activity within the gut itself, which results in increasing the blood flow to the gastrointestinal system. Now, how would these the blood flow is controlled? By means of vasodilators within the circulation, such as hormones like cholecystokinin, vasointestinal peptides, gastrin, and secretin. Also, some kinins like calcitonin and bradykinin, and low oxygen or ischemia will result in increased vasodilation through the presence of high concentrations of adenosine. Now, there is also, apart from the vasodilators or the hormones, there is nervous control, and important to know these factors. For example, the parasympathetic nervous system generally increase the gut activity, so increasing the blood flow by increasing the motility. The sympathetic nervous system, which usually combines exercise or shock, usually results in vasoconstriction of the circulation within the gut. However, after a while, this vasoconstriction will be overcome by autoregulatory escape, لأنه الvasoconstriction is not enough. راح يصير في عنا ischemia وراح يصير في عنا باي برودكتس اوف ذا اسكيميا، فبصير في عنا ايش vasodilator mechanisms اللي تحاول تجيب اكثر blood to the circulation within the gastrointestinal system. طبعا الsympathetic nervous system الconstriction is efficient على المين veins، وبيقدر انه يوفر لي حوالي 2 to 400 ml من الجنرال circulation، يمنعها انها تجي على الgastrointestinal system. Okay. Well, now I'm done with the lecture. إذا في عنا أي أسئلة طلاب. تمام صباب شوية.
يعطيك العافية دكتورة.
الله يعافيك يا أنا.
دكتورة ممكن السلايدات تزودينا فيهم يعني قبل المحاضرة؟
ولا يهمكم السلايدات إن شاء الله هسه بنزلكم إياه. نعم
تمام شكرا دكتورة.
خلص ولا يهمكم السلايدات إن شاء الله هسه بنزلوا لكم على التيمز إن شاء الله.
دكتورة يعني قبل المحاضرة مثلا لما يكون عندنا محاضرة بكرة تنزلي لنا السلايد قبل بيوم عشان على أساس إنه نطبعهم ونكتب معك.
خلص ولا يهمكم إن شاء الله، بس أنزل لكم إياهم قبل بيوم. الأسبوع الجاي راح يكون عندنا 3 محاضرات إن شاء الله، وكل واحدة راح تكون بوقتها، وراح أنزلكم إياهم قبل بيوم أو يومين، أتليست قبل بيوم إن شاء الله.
إن شاء الله.
دكتورة في شيء ثاني بعدك، هلا بخصوص المحاضرة، هلا هي بالنهاية احنا ما عندنا ولا لايف كله محاضرات مسجلة ما عدا الفسيولوجي. هل بالإمكان مثلا بدل ما هي مثلا تكون 8 9 ولا 9 10 نأجلها شوي ساعة مثلا زمن؟ يعني بالنهاية ماشي اوكي ماشيين على جدول نص اليوم، لكن أجلها ساعة زمن ساعتين زمن حتى الواحد مثلا يكون مصحصح حتى يحضر شيء صراحة.
هي حتكون مسجلة يا طه، هاي شغلة التعليمات. ما هي التعليمات إنه إحنا نلتزم بالتايم تيبل، تعليمات التعليم العالي والكلية إنه كل محاضرة في وقتها تعطى.
هو احنا دكتور عندنا الاسبوع الجاي محاضرتين من 8 ل 9 وفيش عندنا محاضرات مسجله، يعني لو في امكان انه مثلا ياخذ استثناء او شيء تتاجل لل10 مثلا او لل9 على الاقل بدل 8 بس.
هي أنا أحكي لك التعليمات ثابتة إنه أنت تعطيها بنفس المحاضرة، حتى بجوز أنت شفت الدكاترة بينزلوا لكم قبل بوقت، لكن الصحيح إنه بوقت المحاضرة، فعشان هيك لازم نلتزم بالتايم تيبل. ولا أنا بتفهم إنكم بكير شوي وكذا، بس شو بدنا نعمل يعني، اعتبروا حالكم داومين.
خلاص إن شاء الله.
وهي إن شاء الله حتكون موجودة، أنا مسجلتها حتنزل لكم على اللايف إن شاء الله.